The envelope felt heavier than it should have. That's how it started for me, something so small, so ordinary, turning strange in my hands. I was standing at my kitchen counter with flour on my fingers from rolling out biscuit dough, and when I picked up the mail from the little basket by the door, I felt that weight and my stomach tightened like it recognized danger before my mind did. It wasn't colorful. No coupons, no church flyers, just a clean, official-looking letter with my full name printed on it like a stamp of ownership. My full name, first, middle, last, the way it appears on legal paperwork. I turned it over, a leasing office. I remember blinking hard, like my eyes could correct it. Like if I stared long enough, it would turn into something else. A doctor's bill, a mistake, anything but what it looked like. The kitchen was warm. The oven light glowed. The ceiling fan made that slow clicking sound it always makes when it's tired. Jasmine was in her room down the hall, music low, humming along while she studied. The house smelled like butter and black pepper and the beans I'd had simmering since noon. A home should feel safe when it smells like that. But that day, I felt like I was standing inside a story somebody had been writing behind my back. I told myself, don't open it. Wait for Calvin, it's his mail too. But the envelope wasn't addressed to Calvin. It was addressed to me. And there are some things you don't wait on when your name is involved. So I opened it. The paper slid out crisp and polite, written in that corporate tone that pretends it's not threatening your peace. It mentioned an apartment unit, numbers, and a letter. It listed a balance due. It listed names. My name. His name. The amount didn't look like a small misunderstanding. It looked like months. It looked like a second life with a monthly price tag. I lowered myself into the nearest chair without meaning to. The chair legs scraped the floor, loud in the quiet. My hands went cold even though the kitchen was warm. I read it again, slower. Then I whispered, no. Not because I didn't understand the words. Because I understood them too well. 2 months ago, I co-signed for my husband. I did it because he held my hand at our kitchen table and told me it was for our future. And now my future was sitting on that paper like a bill. Before all of this, my life wasn't perfect, but it was real. I'm the kind of woman who keeps my receipts in a little zipper pouch in my purse. The kind who folds towels the same way every time because it makes the linen closet look like a place that has order, even when the rest of life doesn't. I believe in hot meals, clean sheets, and not going to bed angry, even if you go to bed tired. Calvin used to call me old-fashioned. He'd come behind me while I cooked, wrap his arms around my waist, and say, "Baby, you act like the house gone, fall apart if the pillows ain't lined up." And I'd tap his arm with the spoon. "Move before you get burned." We'd been married 17 years. We met when I was working in a medical billing office that smelled like printer ink and microwaved leftovers. Calvin came in asking about a payment plan for his mother's appointments. He had work boots on and a tired look in his eyes, like life had been leaning on him longer than it should have. He was respectful, he listened, he didn't talk over me. Back then, that felt like rare treasure. We built our family the slow way, overtime hours, budget notebooks, maybe next month plans. We had 2 kids, Marcus, 20, living on campus and calling home when his stomach or his bank account got loud. And Jasmine, 16, bright and sensitive, the kind of girl who pretends nothing hurts her while feeling everything too deeply. There were good seasons. Seasons where Calvin made me laugh until I had tears in my eyes. Seasons where he surprised me with grocery store flowers, nothing fancy, just carnations, but he'd hand them to me like I was worth more than the struggle we were in. But the last year had been heavy. The warehouse started cutting hours. Calvin's paycheck shrank and I watched him shrink with it, not physically, pride-wise. He started wearing stress like a second shirt. He'd sit on the couch scrolling his phone, jaw tight, eyes somewhere else. If I asked what was wrong, he'd say, "Nothing." But his nothing carried a sharp edge, like my concern was another bill he couldn't afford. Then one Friday evening, he came home with a different energy. Too bright, too eager. He kissed my cheek and said, "Denise, I got an idea." He sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a folder, and slid papers toward me gently, like he was handling something fragile. "I'm trying to start something on the side," he said. "Small, just equipment, a little setup. If I can get it going, we won't be scraping like this." I remember the way he looked at me, hopeful, almost desperate. The way his fingers tapped the table like his body was nervous, but his mouth was committed. I asked, "Why you need me to sign?" He leaned back and sighed. "My credit took hits when Mama was sick. Yours is clean. They'll approve it faster if you co-sign." That word settled in my chest like a warning. Co-sign. I told him I didn't like it. I told him I didn't want my name attached to anything I couldn't control. But Calvin reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Warm, familiar. "Baby," he said softly, "I would do it for you." And I believed him. I thought about Marcus, tuition. I thought about Jasmine's cheer fees. I thought about how tired I was of doing grocery math in my head like it was an exam I could fail. So I signed. Not because I understood every page. Because I trusted my husband. After that, Calvin started working late more often. He said he was meeting people, networking, trying to move things forward. Sometimes he came home smelling like fresh soap, like he'd showered somewhere else. When I asked, he smiled like I was being silly. "Warehouse stank," he'd say. "I hit the gym shower first. You don't like me bringing that smell to the bed." It sounded considerate. It sounded like love. But now, holding that leasing office letter, I realized how easy it is for a lie to wear the same clothes as care. That night, after dinner, after Jasmine went to her room, after Calvin fell asleep on the couch with the TV murmuring low, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked my credit. The screen glowed against my face in the dark kitchen. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the house settling, the faint tick of the clock like it was counting down to something. When the page loaded, my throat tightened. There it was, an account tied to a rental company I didn't recognize. My name connected to Calvin. My hands started to shake. And I realized, with a cold clarity that made my stomach drop, that envelope wasn't the beginning. It was just the first thing that made it to my house. I sat there a long time after the credit screen loaded, staring at that unfamiliar account like it had crawled out of the dark and settled itself in my lap. My name was connected to it in a way that didn't feel like marriage anymore. It felt like a trap, clean, legal, and quiet. I took a screenshot. Then another. Not because I had a plan yet, but because something in me finally understood I couldn't afford to be the kind of woman who only has feelings. Feelings fade. Feelings can be manipulated. But proof has a weight even liars can't talk away. I clicked through the details with my heart pounding. Dates, inquiries, a payment history that didn't look healthy. The more I looked, the more my stomach tightened, because whatever Calvin had created, it wasn't sitting neatly under control. It was already slipping. I heard the couch springs creak in the living room and froze, holding my breath like a teenager sneaking after curfew. Calvin shifted, muttered something in his sleep, then went quiet again. That's when it hit me, hard and humiliating. He was sleeping peacefully. And I was awake, learning I'd been used. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum and the old clock tick like it had no mercy. Then I remembered the folder. The papers Calvin had slid toward me with that hopeful voice. The ones I signed because I wanted to believe my husband would never put my name in danger. I pulled the drawer open and took them out. Under the dim stove light, I read them slowly, page by page, like I was reading a language I should have demanded to understand the first time. And there it was. A few pages had been signed before all the information was filled in. Blank spaces, half-completed lines, boxes waiting to be checked later. I could hear Calvin's voice in my memory, easy, confident. Standard paperwork, they fill the rest later. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crinkled. I pressed it flat again. Because even my anger didn't want to be messy. I wasn't trying to destroy something. I was trying to understand what had been done to me. I set the papers in a manila folder and tucked it in the cabinet above the microwave, the place I keep cookbooks Calvin never touches. Then I washed my face, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until morning. When the sun came up, the world tried to be normal again. Jasmine came down the hallway in her socks, hair wrapped, phone in her hand, eyes still sleepy. "Morning, Mom," she said, opening the fridge. "Morning, baby," I answered, forcing my voice into a soft place. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, the last 2 sausage links. My hands moved like they'd been doing it for years because they had. Routine is a powerful disguise. It can make you look okay even when you're not. Calvin came in rubbing his face, hair a little wild. He kissed my cheek the way he always did, quick, familiar, and for a second my body responded before my heart could stop it. That kiss felt like a habit more than affection. "You up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He nodded, like he understood, like we were sharing the same sleeplessness for the same reason. But we were. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling his phone. I watched him carefully, the way his thumb moved fast over the screen, the way he angled it down when I walked too close, the way his eyes kept drifting toward the front window, like he was already thinking about leaving. "Got a busy day?" I asked lightly. "Yeah," he said. "Work stuff." "Work stuff," I repeated, keeping my tone casual. He glanced up at me. "Why you say it like that?" I gave him a small smile. "Like what?" He stared a beat too long, then looked away. "Nothing." Jasmine came back into the kitchen, grabbed her backpack, and kissed my cheek. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too," I said, holding her a second longer than usual. She didn't notice. Teenagers always think they have more time than they do. Calvin tossed his keys in his hand, ready to go. "I'll be home later," he said. I nodded. "Drive safe." He paused at the door like he wanted to say something else. Then he walked out. I waited until his truck backed out of the driveway and turned the corner. Then I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely calm, like the part of me that used to hesitate had stepped aside and let something older, wiser, more protective take the wheel. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call my sister. I didn't call my mama. Not yet. Because I knew how people are. The moment you speak, your pain becomes a conversation. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has advice. And half the time, they push you toward what makes them comfortable, not what keeps you safe. I drove across town, following the trail the paperwork had left behind. The streets looked familiar, gas stations, strip malls, the same tired potholes, but my chest felt like it was filled with glass. I kept thinking about the cosign. How simple it had seemed. How proud Calvin looked when I agreed, like I'd proven I was loyal. But loyalty is not the same thing as letting somebody gamble with your future. When I pulled into the apartment complex, my heart started beating loud enough to drown out the radio. I turned it off. I didn't want music touching this moment. The buildings were neat, beige, trimmed with white railings. The landscaping looked cared for. The kind of place you choose when you want things to look stable from the outside. I parked near the leasing office and sat in the car for a full minute, breathing slow. My palms were damp. "Just facts," I whispered to myself. "You're here for facts." Inside the leasing office, cold air hit my skin. It smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee. A young woman behind the desk smiled like her day was simple. "Hi, how can I help you?" "I need to confirm a lease I'm listed on," I said, handing her my ID. Her fingers moved fast over the keyboard. Click, click, scroll. Her face stayed polite, but her eyes sharpened like she'd stepped into something sensitive. "Yes," she said carefully. "I see you listed." My throat tightened. "What unit?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I can confirm the unit number." She said it like she was telling me the weather. I wrote it down on the back of a receipt. "Can I get a copy of the lease?" I asked. "We can provide a copy to a leaseholder," she replied. "You'll need to fill out a request form." I filled it out with neat handwriting, because my hands weren't going to betray me in front of a stranger. She disappeared into the back and returned with stapled pages. I walked out with that lease copy pressed against my chest, like it might keep my heart from falling out. Back in my car, I locked the doors and opened it. The start date sat there plain as day, 2 months ago. 2 months ago, Calvin sat at my table and told me we were building something for our future. And under occupants, there was a woman's name. Not mine. Not family. A woman. My mouth went dry again. I stared at the name until the letters stopped looking like letters and started looking like a bruise. Then I lifted my eyes and looked out across the parking lot. And that's when I saw it. Calvin's truck, parked near a stairwell like it belonged there. My breath caught so hard my chest hurt. I sat frozen, hands on the steering wheel, staring at that truck like it was a confession written in metal and paint. Because now I wasn't guessing. I wasn't being insecure. I wasn't overthinking. My husband was here. I got out of the car and started walking, slow at first, then steadier. My legs felt weak, but my spine stayed straight. I wasn't going to stumble through this like a woman begging for answers. I was going to walk through it like a woman collecting the truth. Up the stairs. Along the walkway. Past doors with cute wreaths and welcome mats like people can decorate over secrets. When I reached the unit number from the lease, I stopped. I didn't knock. I leaned in slightly, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of a building, full of other people's lives. My hand hovered near the door, and for a moment I thought about turning around, about going home and confronting Calvin in my kitchen where I felt stronger. But then I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps coming down the walkway. My stomach dropped before I even turned my head. I turned slowly. And there he was, Calvin, walking toward me with a grocery bag in one hand and keys in the other, like this was just another stop in his day. He didn't see me at first. Then he looked up, and his whole body stopped. For a second, Calvin just stood there staring at me like his mind was trying to wake up from a bad dream. The grocery bag swung once in his hand and then went still. His keys caught the sunlight, little flashes of silver that made my eyes sting. He looked at me the way a man looks at a locked door when he's lost the key. "Denise," he said again, quieter this time, What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't trust my voice yet. I didn't want it to tremble and give him a place to stand. She's emotional, she's overreacting, she doesn't understand. So I lifted my chin and asked him the same calm question twice, the way you do when you want the truth to pick a lane. "What are you doing here, Calvin?" His eyes darted past me to the apartment door, then back to my face. That little movement, quick and nervous, told me more than any speech could have. He took a step closer and lowered his voice like the hallway itself was listening. "Baby, listen, this ain't what it looks like." I stared at him, "Then tell me what it is." He swallowed, and I watched his throat work like he was choking on his own story. It's for the business," he said finally. I let a beat pass. "For the business," I repeated slowly, tasting the lie. "So why is there a woman's name listed on the lease, Calvin?" His face changed so fast it was like watching a light get cut off. "What?" he asked too quickly, too fake. "Don't," I said, still soft but sharper now. "Don't act confused. I have the lease in my car." Calvin's jaw clenched. He glanced down the walkway, then back again, his eyes already begging me to lower my voice, to make myself smaller. "Denise, can we not do this out here?" he whispered. I looked around. A few doors down, somebody's TV was loud enough for me to hear the laugh track. A faint smell of fried food drifted from somewhere, somebody else's lunch. A dog barked once, then stopped. Life was going on. And Calvin wanted my pain hidden, so his lie could keep breathing. "We're doing it right here," I said, "because you didn't mind hiding it while you were doing it." He stepped closer, reaching for my arm. I moved back before he could touch me. Calvin's eyes flashed, anger trying to cover fear. "You're making a scene," he hissed. My mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No, Calvin, you made a scene. I just found the address." He ran a hand over his face, keys clinking in his fist. "I was gonna tell you." "When?" I asked. "After you got caught up, after you got comfortable." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out clean. Everything he could say sounded like a confession, so he chose silence instead. And then he did something that made my stomach drop. He shifted his body, just slightly, planting himself directly in front of the apartment door like a guard. Like I was the threat. Like whatever was inside, that apartment needed protection from me. "Move," I said quietly. Calvin shook his head, eyes wide. "Denise, please." That word, please, used to mean he respected me. That day it sounded like he respected his secret more. I took a deep breath and did the simplest thing I could think of. "Open the door," I said. His eyes flicked to the knob. It's not a good time." I nodded slowly. "So it's a good time to put my name on it, but not a good time to let me see it." His shoulders rose as he inhaled, then dropped. "Baby, I'm trying to." "To what?" I cut in, my voice finally trembling. "To keep your wife in the dark while you live like a single man in the light." Calvin flinched. For a moment he looked genuinely ashamed, and my heart, stupid and loyal, wanted to hold on to that as proof that he still had a conscience. But shame doesn't undo damage. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, not to threaten him, not to perform, just to ground myself. My hands needed something to do. Calvin saw the movement and panicked. "Who you calling?" "I haven't decided yet," I said honestly. His voice turned hard. "Denise, don't do that." "Don't do what?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. "Protect myself." He exhaled through his nose, like I was the problem. Then a sound cut through the tension, small, ordinary, and devastating. A lock turning from inside. Calvin froze so completely, it was like someone pressed pause on him. The door opened, and a woman stood there. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s. Brown skin, hair wrapped in a scarf like she was at home. She wore leggings and a loose t-shirt, and in her hand was a dish towel like she'd been wiping down a counter. Her eyes moved from Calvin to me. Confusion crossed her face first. Then caution. "Calvin," she said slowly, like she wasn't sure she liked what she was seeing. "Who is this?" Calvin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I stepped forward, before he could build another lie fast enough to cover both of us. "My name is Denise," I said. "I'm his wife." The word wife didn't come out loud. It came out heavy. The woman blinked like the air had shifted. "Your wife." Behind her, I could see a slice of the apartment, clean, lived in, not some empty workspace like Calvin was trying to sell me. A throw blanket draped over the couch. A candle on the coffee table. Shoes by the door. It looked like a home. Not a business plan. The woman's face went pale, and her fingers tightened around the dish towel. She looked at Calvin like he'd just turned into somebody else. "Calvin," she whispered, hurt rising fast, "you told me you were separated." Calvin squeezed his eyes, shut for a second like he wanted to escape his own choices. "Denise," he started, voice strained, "please." I held up my hand without even looking at him. "Don't." Then I looked back at her, because whatever Calvin was, I could see she was not enjoying this. Her eyes were shining, her lips trembling like she was holding herself together with willpower. "What's your name?" I asked her quieter. She swallowed hard. "Tasha." "Tasha," I repeated, nodding once. "Okay." Calvin's shoulders sagged like hearing her name. Said out loud made this too real. I asked, "How long have you been living here?" Tasha's eyes flicked to Calvin, then back to me. "Since late spring," she whispered. He said it was complicated." I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my heart from doing something reckless. "Late spring," I repeated. So while I was paying our bills, he was paying for this. Calvin's voice came out sharp with panic. Denise, stop. I turned my head toward him, finally letting him see my eyes full on. No, you stop. You stop acting like you're the one being attacked. Tasha's face crumpled and she shook her head. I didn't know, she said quickly. I swear I didn't know. He told me you didn't want him anymore. I studied her face, the way her brows pinched, the way her voice broke on the word swear. I believed that she believed him. Because men who lie don't just deceive one woman. They build two realities and let both women pay for it in different ways. From somewhere deeper inside the apartment, a small voice called out, sleepy and soft. Mama. My breath caught. Tasha turned her head quickly toward the sound, wiping her cheek with the towel like she could erase what was happening. Go back in the room, baby, she called, voice shaking. Then she looked back at me, eyes full of fear now. Please, please don't do this in front of my child. That sentence landed in my chest like a stone. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about collateral damage. Calvin stepped closer to me, lowering his voice again like he could charm the moment back into silence. Denise, let's go home. We can talk. We don't need to. I looked at him, really looked. And I saw it. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about control. I backed up a step, keeping my voice steady. I am going home, I said, but you're not going to follow me into that house and pretend this never happened. Calvin's face tightened. Denise. I cut him off. When you come home, we will talk. And this time, you're going to tell the truth in full sentences. Tasha stood in the doorway like she didn't know where to put her pain. Her eyes kept moving between me and Calvin, like she was trying to find the version of him she fell for and realizing he wasn't real. I glanced at her one last time, softening my voice. Tasha, I said, I'm not here to hurt you, but I am not paying for this. I want you to understand that. Her lips parted, but no words came. I turned away and walked down the walkway with my shoulders back, even though my chest felt like it was splitting. Behind me, I heard Calvin call my name once, small, desperate. I didn't turn around. Because if I turned around, I was afraid I'd do what I always did. I'd soften. And this was not a moment built for softness. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, my legs finally admitted what my pride had been hiding. They shook. Not enough for anybody to notice. Nobody was looking at me like that, but enough for me to grip the railing and breathe through my nose until the tremor passed. Outside, the sun was too bright for what I'd just seen. The parking lot smelled like hot pavement and fabric softener drifting from somebody's open window. Somewhere near the dumpsters, a couple argued in low voices like they had no idea they were rehearsing the same kind of pain I'd just walked out of. I got in my car and locked the doors. Then I sat there with my hands in my lap, staring straight ahead, trying to understand how a person can be married and still be living alone in the truth. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Calvin. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish him, because I needed to make sure I didn't fall back into the old rhythm. Him talking, me listening, me softening, me accepting half-truths just to keep the day moving. I drove home in silence. No radio, no calls, just the hum of the road and my own breathing. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same. The porch, the wind chimes, Marcus, old basketball sitting by the steps like it had been forgotten on purpose. My house looked innocent. Inside, Jasmine's voice floated down the hall. She was on the phone with one of her friends, laughing about something small. Her laughter made my throat tighten because it reminded me what was at stake. Kids don't need perfection, but they do need stability, and stability doesn't grow well in a house full of lies. I stepped into the kitchen and set my purse down gently, like any sudden movement might shatter me. Jasmine came in a few minutes later, still smiling, still light. Hey, Mom, she said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. You went somewhere. I nodded, forcing my face into calm. Ran a few errands. She studied me for a second. the way daughters do when they sense their mother's spirit is somewhere else. "You okay?" she asked. I wanted to lie. Not because I'm dishonest, but because mothers are trained to hold pain quietly so children can keep being children. But I didn't want to teach her that lying is how you survive. So I chose a softer truth. "I'm tired," I said, and reached out to smooth a strand of hair away from her forehead. "Just tired." She nodded slowly. "Okay." She walked back down the hall, and I stood alone in the kitchen with the quiet. That's when the tears came. Not a breakdown, not sobbing on the floor. Just tears sliding down my cheeks while I stood at the sink, staring at a dish that didn't need washing. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and whispered, "Get it together." Because I knew something now. Finding out was only the first wound. What I did next would decide whether I healed or bled slowly for years. I pulled my laptop out and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Calvin had asked me to co-sign. The same table where we'd celebrated birthdays with sheet cake and cheap candles. The same table where my family used to feel like a team. I logged into our joint bank account. At first, everything looked normal: mortgage payment, grocery store charges, utilities. Then I scrolled, and I saw it. Small transfers at first, not huge. The kind you could hide inside a busy month if you knew your wife trusted you. Payments to places I didn't recognize. Charges at stores Calvin never walked into with me, furniture places, home goods, a kid's clothing store that made my stomach clench. Then a charge that stopped my breathing for a second. A daycare. My fingers hovered over the screen. I clicked the transaction details like maybe it would turn into something else if I looked closer. It didn't. It stayed what it was. Money leaving our account to support a child that wasn't mine. I pressed my palm against my chest and sat back in the chair, feeling the air thin in my lungs. So it wasn't just an affair. It was a second household. Built quietly, maintained quietly. With my name holding the door open. My phone buzzed again. "Calvin." This time, I answered, not because I was ready to talk, but because I wanted to control the terms. "Hello," I said, voice even. "Denise," he exhaled like my name was heavy. "Where you at?" "At home," I said. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was low, careful, like he knew the wrong tone could set me off. "We can talk when you get here," I replied. He paused. "Denise, please." "I'm not doing this on the phone," I said. Silence. Then he said, "I'm coming." I hung up and stared at the screen again. Then I did something I never imagined doing while still wearing my wedding ring. I froze my credit. The process was quick, which almost made it worse. A few clicks, a few identity questions, and just like that, I had to lock my own financial life away because my husband couldn't be trusted with my name. After that, I opened a new checking account online, just in my name. I sat there staring at the confirmation email, feeling a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief because I never wanted to separate anything from Calvin. I thought marriage meant joining. Relief because joining shouldn't mean drowning. Around 6 o'clock, Jasmine came back into the kitchen, sniffing the air. "What's for dinner?" she asked. I blinked like I'd forgotten what day it was. Then I stood and opened the fridge. Leftovers, ground beef, rice. "Spaghetti," I said automatically. While the water boiled, I moved around the kitchen on autopilot, stirring sauce, listening to the clink of the spoon against the pot, letting the ordinary sounds hold me steady. Jasmine sat at the table doing homework, pencil tapping lightly. "Daddy coming home?" she asked without looking up. My throat tightened. "He'll be home later," I said. She made a small hum of acknowledgement and kept writing. At 7:45, Calvin's truck rumbled into the driveway. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. I knew that sound the way you know thunder means rain is already on its way. The front door opened, boots on the floor, keys in the dish by the counter. Calvin stepped into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. His face looked tight, not just guilty, guarded, like he'd spent the drive home rehearsing which truths to give and which to keep. "Jasmine," he said quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, baby." "Hey, Daddy," she said, glancing up. Her eyes moved between us like she could feel the air was different. Calvin cleared his throat. "How was school?" "Fine," she said, then looked back down at her homework. I plated dinner quietly. The spaghetti steam rose warm, smelling like tomatoes and garlic, a normal meal in an abnormal house. We ate with too much silence. Calvin chewed like a man trying to avoid choking. Jasmine ate quickly and excused herself early, mumbling something about a quiz. The moment her bedroom door closed, Calvin set his fork down. He leaned forward slightly. "Denise." I folded my napkin and placed it on the table like I was in somebody else's home. "You have two choices," I said softly. His eyes narrowed. "What?" "You can tell me the truth," I continued, "or you can keep lying and watch me protect myself without you." His mouth opened, then closed. "Denise, he started. "Start at the beginning," I said. "Not your excuses, the truth." Calvin's shoulders rose with a shaky breath. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I held his gaze, yet it did. He looked away, jaw tightening. "I met her and it got out of hand." "And the apartment?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, it didn't have to. "Why is my name on that lease, Calvin?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I needed it approved," he said quietly. "They wouldn't, I couldn't." "So you used my credit," I finished. He swallowed. "I was going to pay it." "It's behind," I said. "I saw the account." His eyes flicked up, fear. Then, like a man reaching for the last tool he has, he tried to shift the conversation. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he muttered. I nodded once, slow. "I understand pressure. I've been under it too. Pressure doesn't make you forge trust." Calvin rubbed his face with both hands and exhaled. "Denise, please. Can we talk about this tomorrow?" "No," I said. "Tonight you're sleeping on the couch." His head snapped up. "What?" "Tonight you're sleeping on the couch," I repeated calmly. "And tomorrow you're going to give me access to every account, every statement, every password. We're not doing secrets anymore." His mouth tightened. "You don't trust me." I stared at him until he looked down. "I trusted you," I said quietly. "That's how we got here." Calvin's eyes glistened, but he didn't apologize, not in a clean way, not in a way that carried responsibility. Instead, he looked at me like he wanted me to rescue him from consequences again. And I realized something painful. Some people don't want forgiveness. They want permission to keep going. I stood up and gathered the plates. Calvin sat there in the kitchen chair, shoulders slumped, staring at the table like it might give him an answer. As I rinsed the dishes, the water ran warm over my hands, and I let myself feel one thought clearly, without bargaining. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to ask Calvin for honesty. Tomorrow, I was going to demand accountability. I woke up before my alarm, the way you do when your spirit doesn't trust sleep anymore. The house was still dark, the air cool, and for a few seconds, just a few, I lay there pretending yesterday didn't happen. Pretending Calvin was still the man I knew, pretending our problems were the normal kind, bills, stress, miscommunication. But then my mind caught up. The apartment. The woman. The child's voice calling from inside a place my name was paying for. I sat up slowly and listened. From the living room, I could hear the faint sound of Calvin breathing on the couch, heavy, uneven, like sleep wasn't treating him kindly either. The ceiling fan turned with that soft clicking sound, steady as a metronome for a life trying to keep rhythm while falling apart. I slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen. I didn't turn on the big light. I just used the dim glow over the stove, the one that makes everything look quiet and private. I made coffee, not because I wanted it, but because I needed the smell of something familiar, something that belonged to my routine, not his secrets. While the coffee dripped, I opened my laptop. The screen lit up my face in the dark. I logged into our joint account and began pulling statements the way a woman pulls weeds. Steady, patient, determined to find the roots. At first, I told myself I was just looking for the apartment payments. But once you start looking, you start seeing. There were transfers that didn't match any bill I knew. Charges from stores Calvin never took me to. A furniture place. Home goods. A pharmacy across town. And again, there it was, that daycare charge sitting in the middle of our money like a quiet confession. My fingers froze on the trackpad. I stared at the transaction until my eyes burned. I had raised my children on careful budgeting and prayer. I had stretched meals with rice and hope. I had skipped new shoes so Marcus could have what he needed for school. And Calvin had been sending our money to support a child I didn't even know existed. The coffee finished dripping. The smell filled the kitchen, rich, bitter, warm. I poured a cup and didn't drink it. I just sat there, hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only thing holding me down. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Calvin. He appeared in the doorway wearing the same t-shirt he'd slept in, hair messy, eyes tired. He looked like a man who wanted to say good morning, but didn't deserve to. He cleared his throat. "You up early?" "I couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my voice calm. He stepped closer and glanced at the laptop screen. His face tightened when he recognized what I was doing. "You checking the account?" he asked, voice defensive already. "Yes," I replied. He rubbed his jaw. "Denise, I told you I'm gonna handle it." I looked up at him slowly. "You've been handling things all by yourself, Calvin. That's the problem." His jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to argue, but arguing with facts makes a man feel small. And Calvin hated feeling small. I turned the laptop toward him and tapped the daycare transaction. "What is that?" I asked. His eyes dropped to the screen, then flicked away like he couldn't stand to look at what he'd done. He started, then stopped. "What is it?" I repeated, softer but firmer. Calvin swallowed. "It's for her kid." "For her kid," I echoed, and my voice didn't rise, but something in it sharpened. "So you used our account." He lifted his hands a little, like he was trying to calm me. "She needed help." I stared at him, "And your wife did." That landed. Calvin's shoulders dropped slightly. "Denise." "I want the truth," I said. "Not your excuses, the truth." He looked down at the floor, then back at me. "I met Tasha last year," he admitted quietly. It started small." "How small?" I asked. He hesitated. "Calvin." His lips pressed together. "Last fall." Last fall. My mind pulled up memories like it was flipping through a photo album I didn't want to see. The first time he said he had to work late. The first time he came home smelling like soap that wasn't ours. The way he stopped reaching for me in bed like my body had become a burden. I nodded slowly, swallowing the ache. "And the apartment?" I asked. Calvin's voice dropped. "I needed a place." "A place," I repeated. "So you took my name." He winced. "I didn't mean to." "You did," I cut in, "and it's behind." His eyes snapped up. "I'm catching up." "With what money?" I asked. He didn't answer. That silence was loud enough to fill the kitchen. I closed the laptop carefully, like I was closing a casket. "We're going to the leasing office today," I said. Calvin stiffened. "Why?" "Because I'm on that lease," I replied. "And I'm not going to let you drag me down quietly." His face hardened. "You trying to embarrass me?" I stood up, coffee mug still untouched. "You embarrassed yourself when you lied. I'm just refusing to be collateral damage." He stared at me, breathing heavy through his nose. For a second, I thought he might refuse. Then he looked down and muttered, "Fine." By late morning, we were in the car together. The drive felt longer than it should have. The air between us was thick, filled with everything he'd hidden and everything I'd finally seen. Calvin sat with his arms folded, staring out the window like he was being forced to attend his own consequences. When we walked into the leasing office, the same lemon-clean smell hit me, and the same bright smile from the receptionist didn't reach her eyes this time. She glanced at Calvin, then back at me, like she could feel the tension but didn't want it near her desk. "I need to speak to the manager," I said. A few minutes later, we were in a small office with a man behind a desk, glasses perched on his nose. He had the calm face of someone who has seen every version of human mess: cheating, eviction, screaming couples in the lobby, and learned to keep his voice even. "How can I help?" he asked politely. I sat up straight. "My name is on a lease for an apartment I did not knowingly agree to in the way it's being used," I said. "I need copies of everything, ledger, payment history, and I need to understand what my rights are." Calvin shifted beside me, jaw clenched. The manager typed, eyes scanning the screen. "As a listed leaseholder," he said, "you do have the right to a key." Calvin's head snapped toward him. "A key?" The manager nodded, still calm. "Yes, sir." My stomach tightened, not because I was scared, but because I could feel Calvin's panic rising. A key meant access. Access meant no more hiding behind stories. "And removing me from the lease?" I asked. The manager's expression turned careful. "That depends. Typically, it requires a new qualifying leaseholder and a formal change, or termination and release, if there are balances due." "How much is due?" I asked. He read off numbers that made my throat tighten. Calvin stared straight ahead, face drained. I nodded slowly and kept my voice steady. "Print it all," I said, "and document that I requested copies and access today." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. When he handed me the printed ledger and policy pages, the paper felt like armor. Then the receptionist brought out a key. Small, ordinary, heavy with meaning. I wrapped my fingers around it and looked at Calvin. His eyes flicked to the key like it was a threat. Outside in the car, Calvin finally spoke. "You got what you wanted," he said bitterly. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. "I got what I needed," I corrected. "There's a difference." He shook his head. "So what now? You gonna go in there and what, inspect the place like I'm some child?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I'm going to see what my name has been paying for." Calvin's voice rose. "Denise, don't do that." "Don't do what?" I asked, turning onto the main road. "Look at the truth." He pressed his lips together, breathing hard. "She got her kid in there." "And I have my kids at home," I said, voice quiet but firm. "And you didn't think about them when you did this." Calvin went silent. The rest of the drive, he stared out the window like he was watching his life pass by. When we pulled back into the apartment complex, Calvin's hands were tight in his lap. He turned to me, voice low. "Denise, please." I reached into my pocket and held the key up between us. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm doing this because you hurt me, and then you tried to hide the evidence." I got out of the car. Calvin followed slower this time, like each step weighed more than the last. We climbed the stairs. The hallway smelled faintly like somebody's fried lunch and cheap air freshener. A TV played behind a door somewhere, laughter leaking out into the walkway like a mockery. We stopped in front of the apartment door. Calvin stood slightly behind me, breathing heavy. I slid the key into the lock. And before I turned it, I paused, one hand on the knob, eyes closed for half a second, because I knew something important. Once I opened that door, I wasn't just going to see a room. I was going to see the life my husband chose, while he was still coming home to mine. The key turned smoother than I expected. Like the lock had been used, so often it didn't even question who belonged there. The door opened, and cool air rolled out, air that smelled like vanilla and laundry detergent, the kind of clean scent people use when they're trying to make a place feel like peace. I stepped inside first. Not because I was brave. Because if I let Calvin go first, he would start shaping what I saw with his body, his words, his panic. He would stand in front of things. He would explain too quickly. He would control the moment. And I was done letting him control what my eyes were allowed to know. The apartment was quiet. Not empty, quiet like someone had just stepped out and planned to come right back. A throw blanket was folded on the couch like a careful hand had arranged it. A small candle sat on the coffee table, unlit but recently used. The TV remote rested neatly beside it. I stood there, taking it in, and something in my chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't swallow. Because it wasn't just an apartment. It was a home. I could tell by the details. A pair of women's sandals sat by the door. A child's toy truck was pushed under the edge of the couch, one wheel missing. On the kitchen counter, a bright plastic cup with a lid sat near the sink like somebody had just washed it. And in the corner, near the little dining nook, there was a small basket filled with children's books, dog-eared and loved, not decorative. Calvin stepped in behind me slowly. His breath sounded loud in the quiet, like he was afraid to disturb whatever life lived here. "Denise," he murmured, voice pleading already, "please." I didn't answer. I walked forward. On the wall near the couch were framed photos. Not many. Just enough. One was Calvin standing beside Tasha, both of them smiling at what looked like a fair, bright lights behind them. Her head tilted toward his shoulder. Another was Calvin holding a little boy, cheek pressed to cheek, both of them grinning like family. That picture hit me the hardest. Because I've seen Calvin smile for our children. I've seen that softness in his face when he's proud. And that's what was in that frame. Not a mistake smile. Not a temporary smile. A settled smile. Like he belonged. My fingers went cold. I turned my head slowly and looked at Calvin. "That child knows you," I said. Calvin's eyes flicked to the photo, then away. He's her son." "He's sitting in a picture with you like you're his father," I replied, my voice quiet but cutting clean. "Do you hear yourself?" Calvin's jaw tightened. "Denise, I told you it's complicated." I nodded once. Everything is complicated when you want it to excuse you. I walked into the kitchen. The counters were clean. A dish rack held plates and cups that weren't ours. A small calendar hung on the side of the fridge with appointments written in neat handwriting. One note was stuck under a flower magnet, a reminder about diapers. Diapers. I stared at that note until my eyes burned. Then I opened a lower cabinet. Plates, bowls, containers. And there, pushed toward the back, was a blue plastic container I recognized immediately. Because I bought it from the dollar store last summer and wrote our last name on the bottom with a black marker. I pulled it out and flipped it over. My handwriting stared back at me. For a second, the room swayed, not like I was dizzy, but like reality was shifting under my feet. I held it up without even looking at Calvin. "So you've been taking things from our house too." Calvin stepped closer fast, voice low and urgent. "It's just a container, Denise." I turned to him slowly. "It's not just a container," I said. "It's the fact that you stopped respecting the line between what belongs to us and what belongs to your lie." His eyes narrowed, frustration trying to rise again. "You looking for reasons to hate me?" I shook my head. "No, Calvin, I'm looking at the reasons you gave me." I set the container down gently, then opened a drawer. Mail. A stack of it. Some addressed to Calvin, some addressed to Tasha, and a few, my stomach tightened, addressed to me. Not many, but enough. Notices and statements that should have come to my home, but had been rooted here. Like this apartment had been collecting pieces of my life quietly, like a spider web. I took my phone out and started taking pictures, slow, steady. Calvin watched me like he didn't recognize me anymore. "Why you doing all that?" he asked, voice tense. "Because you're going to try to rewrite this later," I replied, "and I'm not letting you." He scoffed softly. "You acting like I'm some criminal." I didn't look up. "You used my name, that's not innocent." Then I walked to the bedroom. The air in there was cooler, and it smelled like lotion, sweet and powdery. The bed was made neatly with 2 pillows. On the dresser sat women's perfume and a hairbrush. In the closet, I saw Calvin's shirts folded on a shelf like they had a permanent home. not a temporary place. A home. I stared at those shirts, and grief rose in me like heat. Grief for the nights I lay awake wondering why he felt far away, blaming stress, blaming myself, blaming time. He wasn't far. He was split. A soft sound came from the hallway, tiny footsteps, then a pause. I turned. Tasha stood in the doorway holding her little boy on her hip. He looked sleepy, cheeks full, eyes heavy. His little hand rested against her shoulder like he belonged there. Tasha's face tightened when she saw me inside. You have a key?" she asked, voice shaking. "Yes," I said, calm. "My name is on the lease." Calvin shifted behind me, his shame filling the room like smoke. Tasha's eyes flashed toward him. "Calvin, what is this? Why is she in here?" I answered before he could. "Because I'm legally responsible for this apartment," I said, "and I didn't know it existed until a notice showed up with my name on it." Tasha's mouth fell open. "You put her name on this?" Calvin lifted his hands a little. "I did what I had to do." "What you had to do," I repeated softly, looking him in the eye now. "Or what you wanted to do." Tasha's breathing turned fast. Her son shifted in her arms, rubbing his face against her neck. She kissed his head automatically, like her body knew to comfort him even while her heart cracked. "Baby," she whispered to him, "go sit on the couch, okay? Watch your show." She set him down gently. He waddled to the couch and curled up under the blanket like this was his safe place. Then Tasha turned back to Calvin, tears rising. "You told me you were separated," she said, voice trembling with anger now. "You told me your wife didn't care." Calvin's face tightened. "I told you it was complicated." Tasha shook her head hard, like she was trying to shake the lie out of her own ears. "No, you told me you were free." I stood there watching them, and for the first time, I saw Calvin not as my husband, but as a man juggling people like objects, moving them around to keep his comfort intact. I turned to Tasha, softening my voice. "I'm not here to fight you," I said, "but I need you to understand something clearly. I am removing myself from this lease. I am not paying for this apartment anymore." Tasha's face crumpled. "I can't afford this on my own," she whispered. Calvin stepped forward quickly. "I'll handle it," he said, voice urgent. "I got it." I looked at him, calm as a closed door. "You do handle things, Calvin. You hide them until they explode." He flinched. Tasha wiped her cheeks hard, anger and fear mixing together. "So what? You're just leaving me with the mess," she snapped, then her voice broke halfway through. I didn't take it personally. Hurt makes people reach for blame just to feel steady. "I'm leaving him with the mess," I said quietly. "The mess belongs to the person who made it." The room went still, except for the cartoon playing softly on the TV and the hum of the air conditioner. I glanced at the child on the couch, his small body curled under that blanket, and my chest tightened. He didn't ask for any of this. None of us did. I looked at Tasha again. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it not as a surrender but as a human truth. "I know what it feels like to trust somebody who's lying." Tasha nodded once, tears slipping down her face. Calvin stood there in the middle of the room, like a man who wanted both lives to forgive him at the same time. But life doesn't work like that. I walked to the door. Calvin followed me, voice low and desperate. "Denise, please don't tell the kids like this. Please don't." I stopped at the threshold and turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. "You should have thought about our kids when you used my name," I said. Then I stepped out into the warm hallway air and breathed like I'd been underwater for months. Behind me, the door closed softly. Not slammed, just shut. And somehow, that quiet closing felt louder than any scream. By the time I got back to my car, my hands were steady, too steady for what I'd just lived through. That's what shock does sometimes. It doesn't always make you crumble. Sometimes it makes you clear. Like your body decides it can't afford feelings yet, so it stores them somewhere deep and gives you focus instead. I drove home with my eyes dry and my jaw tight. The streets looked ordinary. People pulling into grocery store parking lots, a school bus stopping at a corner, a man jogging with his headphones in like the world was still simple. I kept thinking, if they knew what I know right now, would they still move that casually? When I pulled into my driveway, the wind chimes were moving gently, tapping out their little song like they didn't know my marriage had changed shape. Inside, Jasmine was at the kitchen table doing homework. Her pencils scratched against paper. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. She looked up when I walked in and gave me that teenage half-smile. "Hey, Mom, you okay? You look like you've been driving all day." "I'm okay," I said automatically, then softened it. "Just tired, baby." She studied my face for a second, and I felt the familiar panic rise. "Please don't make me explain this to you yet." But Jasmine just nodded and went back to her work like she trusted my tired to mean what it used to mean. I walked into my bedroom and shut the door quietly behind me. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the comforter like it belonged to someone else. My wedding ring felt heavy. Not because it weighed more than it used to, but because it meant less than it used to. I took it off and set it in the little dish on my dresser, the same dish Calvin used to toss his keys into when he came home. My fingers trembled for the first time all day. Then I inhaled slowly and said out loud, "Okay." Not like a woman giving up. Like a woman making a plan. I went back into the kitchen, opened the drawer where we keep old receipts and spare pens, and pulled out a notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then I wrote what I knew, clean and simple. Lease in my name. Balance owed. Apartment visited. Other woman. Child in home. Mail addressed to me at that apartment. Photos taken. Seeing it on paper did something to me. It made it real in a way my heart couldn't talk itself out of. I heard the front door open around 7, and my body went still. Calvin's boots hit the floor heavier than usual. The keys landed in the dish with a sharp clink that made Jasmine glance up. "Hey, Jazzy," he called, forcing warmth into his voice. "Hey," she answered cautiously, eyes moving between us like she could feel the air didn't sit right. Calvin stepped into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. His face tightened, guilt first, then that familiar guardedness like he'd already decided what parts of the truth I deserved. He kept his voice low. "Can we talk?" "After Jasmine goes to her room," I said calm. He nodded once, like he appreciated the privacy, like privacy was something he respected when it protected him. Jasmine gathered her books slowly. "I'm gonna study," she mumbled, then paused and looked at me. "You sure you okay, Mom?" I walked over and kissed her forehead. "I'm sure." She left, and I waited until her bedroom door clicked shut before I turned back to Calvin. He didn't sit. He stood by the counter with his arms crossed, like he was bracing for a fight. I didn't give him one. I leaned back against the kitchen table, hands flat on the wood, and spoke in the same voice I use at work when someone tries to blame me for their mistake. "Tell me the truth," I said. "From the beginning, no speeches." Calvin swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the hallway like he was checking whether Jasmine could hear. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said. "That's not the beginning," I replied. He exhaled hard, then said it like the words tasted sour. "I met Tasha last year." I nodded once small. "Keep going." Calvin rubbed his forehead. It wasn't supposed to get serious." I stared at him. "You don't sign a lease for something that isn't serious." His jaw clenched. "The apartment," he admitted, "was supposed to be temporary. I needed somewhere to think." "To think," I repeated. "So you brought groceries. So you took containers from my kitchen. So you framed pictures like a family." His face tightened. "You went through my stuff." I didn't flinch. "You put my name on it. It became my stuff." For a second, he looked like he wanted to raise his voice, wanted to reclaim power by making me seem unreasonable. But then he remembered our daughter was in this house, and he swallowed it down. "Denise," he said, trying to soften, "I'm sorry." I watched his face while he said it. I listened for ownership. All I heard was discomfort. "Sorry doesn't protect my credit," I said. "Sorry doesn't pay that balance. His eyes dropped. I was gonna catch it up. With what money? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. That silence was an admission he didn't want to make out loud. I nodded, feeling a cold calm settle into my bones. Okay. Calvin's eyes snapped up. Okay what? Okay means I'm done being confused, I said. It means I'm done trusting you with anything that carries my name. His face reddened. So what, you gonna leave me? I'm not discussing the marriage tonight, I said. Tonight I'm discussing safety. He scoffed. Safety. Yes, I said, voice steady. Financial safety, emotional safety, a roof over our kids' heads safety. Calvin took a step toward me, hands out like he was trying to bring me back into the old pattern. His arms, his apology, my forgiveness. I stepped back. Tonight you're sleeping on the couch, I said. His mouth fell open. Denise. I'm not debating it, I continued. And tomorrow you're giving me access to every account we have, every statement, every password. If you refuse, I'll do what I have to do legally. His eyes narrowed. You got a lawyer already. I'm getting one, I said, because you've shown me you'll sign my name and call it love. Calvin's face changed then, fear rising under his pride. You're trying to destroy me, he muttered. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm trying to keep you from destroying me. He stared at me, chest rising and falling hard. Then he whispered, what about Tasha? That question, what about her, almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so revealing. Even now, with me standing there bruised and upright, he was trying to manage her comfort too. What about her? I repeated. Calvin's voice turned defensive. She got a kid. She can't. Don't, I said softly, cutting him off. Don't bring that child into this like you're some hero. If you cared about children the way you're pretending to right now, you would have cared about ours first. His eyes went wet, but he didn't speak. I turned away from him and walked to the phone charger on the counter, plugging my phone in like I needed it to stay alive. Like I needed myself to stay alive. Then I did 3 things back to back, with the same steady hands I use when I'm fixing a mistake at work. I called my bank and asked what I could change immediately, what required both signatures, what didn't. I placed a freeze on my credit. And I scheduled a consultation with an attorney for the earliest appointment available. When I finished, Calvin was still standing there, looking smaller than he did when he walked in. I looked at him once long. I loved you, I said quietly, and I might always love the man I thought you were, but I can't love you into being honest. Calvin's lips trembled like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to make it about forgiveness and faith and second chances. But he didn't have the right words. He just nodded once, stiff, and walked out of the kitchen toward the living room. I stood alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of Jasmine's music down the hall. Then I picked up my notebook, wrote one more line at the bottom of the page, and underlined it twice. No more secrets in my name. The next day at work, my body moved like it always did, but my mind didn't live in my office anymore. I answered calls. I pushed paperwork through the system. I nodded when coworkers talked about weekend plans and rising grocery prices. I even laughed once at something somebody said in the break room, an automatic sound that didn't match the weight in my chest. All day, I felt like I was carrying a bowl of water filled to the brim. One wrong move, and everything would spill. At lunch, I sat in my car instead of going inside the break room. I peeled an orange slowly, the citrus smell sharp and clean, and I stared at my hands while I ate like I was trying to remember who I was before my name got tangled up in somebody else's secrets. Calvin texted me twice. Can we talk tonight? Please don't do anything you can't take back. I didn't respond. Because the truth is, Calvin was the one who had done something he couldn't take back. He just wanted me to be the one to cover it. After work, I drove straight to the attorney's office. It was a small building near the courthouse, brick outside, neutral carpet inside, the kind of place that smells faintly like old paper and stale coffee. A receptionist handed me a clipboard, and the questions on those forms hit different when your real life is attached to them. Married. Joint assets. Debt. Dependence. I wrote my name slowly, carefully, like I was reclaiming it. The attorney was a woman with kind eyes and a steady voice. Her office had framed certificates on the wall and a small plant by the window that looked like somebody remembered to water it. "Tell me what happened," she said gently. So I did. I told her about the cosign papers, the letter, the credit account, the lease copy, the apartment, the other woman, the child, the daycare charge, and the money moving out of our joint account like it had a second set of hands. I didn't cry while I spoke. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I needed her to hear me clearly. I needed her to understand I wasn't here to be dramatic. I was here to be safe. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment, reading through the copies I brought, screenshots, ledger pages, notes in my own handwriting. Then she looked up at me. "You did the right thing documenting everything," she said. "The priority is to limit your exposure. If your name is on that lease, you're legally responsible. If it falls behind, they can come after you." My throat tightened. "That's what I'm afraid of." She nodded slowly. "We can draft a written agreement that places responsibility on your husband for that lease, including reimbursement of marital funds used for the apartment. We can also help you take steps toward legal separation if needed, especially to protect your finances." I swallowed. I don't want to ruin him. I just want my life back. Her expression softened. Protecting yourself isn't ruining him, it's setting a boundary. That word, boundary, landed in me like permission. She slid a sheet of paper toward me with a list. Open separate bank account. Redirect paycheck. Gather statements for 12 months. Freeze credit. Communicate in writing when possible. I stared at the list and felt something strange rise in my chest. Not happiness. Relief. Because finally there was a path, not an emotional one, an actionable one. Before I left, she said something else that stayed with me all night. "People will try to pressure you into silence for the sake of appearances," she warned. "They'll call you cold, they'll call you unforgiving, but they won't pay the bill if your name gets ruined." I nodded. I understand. On the way home, I stopped at my bank and opened a new account in just my name. The banker was polite, quick, like she didn't know she was watching a woman quietly change the direction of her life. I sat in my car afterwards staring at the account paperwork, the ink still fresh, and I felt the grief hit me harder than it had in the apartment. Not because the account was painful, because it was proof that the marriage I believed in had stopped being safe. When I got home, the house smelled like laundry detergent. Jasmine had a load going. She was in the living room with her legs tucked under her, watching something on her phone while half reading a textbook. "Hey, Mom," she said, looking up. "Daddy home." "He'll be home later," I said. She watched my face again, careful. "Y'all still mad at each other?" I sat beside her for a moment and smoothed her hair back the way I used to when she was little. "Me and your daddy are dealing with grown-up problems," I said softly. "And I want you to remember something. None of it is your fault." Her eyes widened. "Is he leaving?" My throat tightened, but I held my voice steady. "I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I'm going to make sure you're okay." Jasmine's lip trembled. "Did he do something?" I took a breath, choosing words that wouldn't poison her love for her father, but also wouldn't lie to her. "Your daddy hasn't been honest," I said. "And honesty is the foundation of a home. When it breaks, we have to rebuild, either together or separately." She stared at me like she was trying to translate adult pain into teenage understanding. Then her eyes filled with tears. "Are you okay?" she whispered. That question almost broke me. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the familiar softness of my child's head against my shoulder. "I'm hurt," I admitted, "but I'm strong, and I'm going to show you what strength looks like without losing my dignity." A little later, Marcus called. My son's name lit up my phone, and my heart squeezed. He always called when he needed advice or food money or just a piece of home. I stepped into my bedroom and closed the door quietly. "Hey, baby," I said. "Hey, Ma," Marcus replied, voice cautious. "You okay? I've been texting Dad and he's weird." I closed my eyes. I hadn't wanted my children to be dragged into this, but I also knew secrets don't stay contained when grown folks start panicking. "Marcus," I said gently, "I need to tell you something before you hear it from somebody else." There was a pause. "What's going on?" I told him the truth, clean, not cruel. "Your father has been unfaithful. There's another apartment. My name got tied into it. I'm handling it legally and financially." Marcus didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice sounded older than 20. "So he'd been lying to you," he said quietly. "Yes," I whispered. Marcus exhaled hard. "Where is he right now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Ma," he said, and I heard his breath shake. "I'm coming home this weekend." "You don't have to," I said quickly. "I do," he replied. "I'm not letting you sit in this alone." After we hung up, I sat on the bed for a moment with my hands in my lap, staring at my wedding photo on the dresser. Me and Calvin smiling in a way that felt innocent now. That night, Calvin's mother called. Her name flashed on my screen, and my stomach tightened before I even answered, because I knew Calvin had already started shaping the story. "Hello," I said calmly. Her voice came sharp. "Denise, what are you doing to my son?" I held the phone away for half a second, then brought it back. "I'm protecting myself," I said. She sucked her teeth. "He told me you got a lawyer. He said you're trying to take everything from him." I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. "I'm not taking anything that isn't mine," I said, voice even. "I'm trying to keep my name safe, because Calvin used it." There was a silence, thick, uneasy. Then her voice softened just a fraction. "He wouldn't do that." "He did," I said quietly. When I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. I wasn't surprised that Calvin ran to his mother. I was surprised by how little it hurt compared to the lease. Because family opinions can sting, yes. But bad paperwork can ruin you. 2 days later, Marcus came home early. I heard his car before I saw him. The door opened and there he was, tall, tense, eyes red like he hadn't slept right. He hugged Jasmine first, careful, like he didn't want to scare her with his anger. Then he hugged me, tight and long. "I got you, Ma," he whispered. I closed my eyes against his shoulder. "Thank you, baby." Then he pulled back and looked at me, jaw set. "Where, Dad?" I didn't answer right away. Because in that moment, I realized the public consequence was here now. Not neighbors, not church, not gossip. My son was about to look at his father with new eyes. And Calvin wasn't ready for that kind of mirror. I nodded toward the garage. "He's out there." Marcus, shoulders squared. He walked toward the door like he had a purpose, and my heart pounded, not because I thought he'd hurt Calvin, but because I knew words can bruise too. And some bruises you never forget. Marcus didn't slam the back door when he walked toward the garage. He didn't need to. His silence was loud enough. I followed a few steps behind him, my heart pounding the way it does when you know something important is about to happen but you can't control how it lands. The air outside was warm, and the smell of cut grass mixed with motor oil and old cardboard, garage smells, the kind that usually feel ordinary. But that day, nothing felt ordinary. Calvin was out there by the workbench, pretending to fix something that wasn't broken, a wrench in his hand, a bolt he kept turning like he could tighten his life back into place. When he saw Marcus, his face shifted, surprise first, then a quick flash of relief, like he thought his son would be on his side automatically. "Hey man," Calvin said, forcing a smile. "What you doing home?" Marcus didn't smile back. He stood there with his shoulders squared, eyes glossy, jaw tight like he'd been holding in words for days. "Why'd you do it?" Marcus asked quietly. Calvin blinked like he didn't understand the question. "What you mean?" he tried. Marcus took one step closer. You know what I mean. Calvin's smile fell. He glanced at me over Marcus' shoulder, like he wanted me to step in and soften it, to translate the pain into something easier for him to swallow. I didn't, because Calvin had spent too long making me responsible for everybody's comfort but my own. Marcus' voice started trembling, the way it does when a young man is trying his hardest not to cry. You lied to Mom, he said. You made her sign for something she didn't even know about. You had her paying for your secret life like she was stupid. Calvin's face tightened with anger, that defensive anger that shows up when shame gets cornered. Don't talk to me like that, Calvin snapped. Marcus flinched, but he didn't back up. Like what? Marcus asked, louder now. Like I'm your son, like I care, because if you cared, you wouldn't have done her like that. Calvin looked away, breathing hard through his nose. I was under pressure, he muttered, as if pressure could excuse the choices. I felt like I was failing, I needed. Marcus shook his head, tears spilling now, embarrassing him and freeing him at the same time. You didn't fail, Dad, he said, voice thick. You quit. That word hit the garage, like something heavy dropped on concrete. Calvin's shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. Like the weight of what he did finally landed on the part of him that couldn't run anymore. I'm sorry, Calvin whispered. Marcus wiped his face hard with his sleeve. Sorry don't fix Mom's credit. Calvin's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me again, eyes pleading. And I didn't give him softness. I gave him the truth. You're going to sign the agreement, I said calmly. Today. Calvin's jaw clenched. Denise. No, I cut in, quiet but final. You've done enough talking. Now you're going to do what accountability looks like. Marcus' breathing was still uneven. He stared at his father with that painful mix of love and disappointment that no parent should ever ask their child to carry. I'm done, Marcus said, voice low. I'm done defending you to myself. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. Calvin didn't follow. He just stood there in the garage with the wrench still in his hand, like a man who finally realized he can't fix a broken home with tools meant for metal. That afternoon, we went to the attorney's office. Calvin sat beside me in the waiting room, stiff and silent, staring at the floor like the carpet might offer him mercy. I watched his knee bounce up and down, a nervous habit I used to find almost boyish. Now it just looked guilty. When my attorney came out and called us in, Calvin's shoulders rose like he was stepping into a courtroom instead of an office. Inside, the air smelled like paper and printer ink. My attorney didn't raise her voice. She didn't shame him. She just laid out facts the way grown-ups do when emotions have already done enough damage. This agreement, she said, sliding papers toward him, states that you are solely responsible for the lease balance and ongoing payments. It also outlines reimbursement of marital funds used for the apartment. Mrs. Denise will not remain financially exposed. Calvin's lips pressed together. This is extreme. My attorney looked at him over her glasses. Extreme is putting your wife's name on a lease without transparency. Calvin stared at the papers. His hands shook slightly when he picked up the pen. And for a split second, I felt something like grief for him, not because he didn't deserve consequences, but because I remembered the man he used to be. The man who once held my hand like it was his honor. But grief doesn't pay bills. Grief doesn't protect your children. Calvin signed. Each stroke of the pen sounded loud in my ears. When he finished, he set the pen down slowly like it weighed too much. My attorney nodded and collected the paperwork. Moving forward, she said, communication about finances should be in writing, and we will pursue removal of Denise from the lease as soon as possible. Calvin didn't argue again, not out loud. But I could feel the resentment in his silence. And I accepted it. Because I wasn't here for his comfort anymore. I was here for my safety. That evening, Calvin tried one more time to pull me back with softness. He stood in the kitchen while I packed Jasmine's lunch for the next day, his voice careful, almost gentle. "Denise," he said, "I know I messed up, I do, but we got history." I didn't stop packing the lunch. History doesn't give you permission to harm me. He swallowed. "Can we at least keep this quiet for the kids, for the family?" I finally looked up at him, and I saw what he really meant. Not for the kids. For his image. "For the kids," I repeated slowly. "I will be honest in an age-appropriate way. But I will not lie for you, Calvin, not anymore." His eyes narrowed, and I saw anger flicker. "You want to turn everybody against me," he muttered. I shook my head. "You turned yourself against your own home." He stepped back like my words pushed him. And that's when his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen, and I watched his face change. Panic, then irritation, then the quick smoothing of expression like he wanted to hide it. "Tasha," I said softly, not a question. Calvin's jaw tightened. He turned away and walked toward the living room to take the call quietly, like he still believed secrecy could save him. But I heard enough. "I told you I'm handling it," Calvin whispered. "Just calm down, she's doing too much." I stood at the sink, hands in dishwater that had gone lukewarm, and I felt something settle inside me like a final stone. He was still talking about me like I was a problem. Not like I was his wife. Not like I was the mother of his children. Like I was an obstacle to the life he wanted. 2 days later, his mother came back. This time, she didn't come with anger first. She came with fear. She stood in my living room, purse tight under her arm, eyes not as sharp as before. "Denise," she said quietly, "is it true, all of it?" I nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Her lips trembled. "And there's a child." I inhaled slowly. "I don't know what's biological," I said carefully, "but I know there is a child in that home, and our money has been helping support that home." Ms. Evelyn closed her eyes, like she was trying to pray the facts away. Then she opened them and looked at me, really looked at me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and that apology felt heavier than anything she'd said before. I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She swallowed. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer fast, because I wasn't trying to sound tough. I was trying to sound true. "I'm going to keep my children stable," I said, "and I'm going to keep my name safe." She nodded, eyes wet, then turned and walked out of my house slower than she'd entered. That night, Calvin packed a duffel bag. Not everything, just enough to leave. Jasmine stood in the hallway with her arms wrapped around herself, tears slipping down her face in quiet lines. Marcus stood beside her, jaw clenched, one arm around her shoulder like a shield. Calvin stopped at the door and looked back at us. His eyes landed on Jasmine and softened with guilt. "Baby girl," he whispered, "I love you." Jasmine didn't answer. Her silence was her boundary. Calvin looked at Marcus, and Marcus didn't look away. Then Calvin looked at me. "Denise," he said, voice hoarse, "I'm sorry." I believed he was sorry. But sorry came too late to be protection. "I hope you learn," I said quietly, "for your sake." Calvin nodded once, like his throat couldn't hold more than that. Then he walked out. The door closed, and the house didn't fall apart. I stood there listening to the quiet that followed him, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since that envelope arrived. Not happiness. Not relief. But space. Room for truth. Room for healing. The first morning after Calvin left, I woke up and listened, really listened. No couch springs, no heavy boots in the hallway, no low TV murmuring from the living room like a man trying to drown out his own guilt. Just the house. The refrigerator humming, the quiet click of the ceiling fan, the soft, almost shy sound of my wind chimes outside. I didn't feel happy, but I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. I felt like my home belonged to the truth again. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window while it brewed, watching the sunlight creep across the porch boards. The smell was warm and bitter, and it grounded me. It reminded me that even when life turns ugly, you still have to feed yourself. You still have to show up for your children. You still have to put one foot in front of the other and act like you deserve stability, because you do. Jasmine came down the hallway, rubbing her eyes. She paused when she didn't see Calvin's shoes by the door. Her face tightened. He really gone? I walked over and pulled her into a hug before she could build a wall around herself. He's not gone from being your father, I said softly. He's just not living here right now. Jasmine's shoulders shook once. She tried to swallow her cry like she was ashamed of it. I held her tighter. You don't have to be strong for me, I whispered. I'm your mama, that's my job. She nodded against my chest, breathing uneven, then pulled away and wiped her face fast like she didn't want to be seen. Marcus called later that day, checking on us like he'd become the man of the house overnight. How, Jazz? He asked. She's hurting, I admitted, but she's okay, we're okay. Marcus went quiet, then said, Ma, I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes for a second at that, because praise from your child feels different. It doesn't inflate you, it humbles you. Thank you, baby, I whispered. I'm just doing what I have to do. Over the next few weeks, my life became paperwork and peace in small portions. I moved my paycheck into my new account. I set up automatic payments for the mortgage and utilities from a controlled transfer, enough to keep the house stable, not enough to quietly fund anything I didn't approve. I stopped hoping money would be there. I started knowing. Calvin tried to slide back into old habits at first, calling like nothing happened, texting late at night with soft words. I miss you. Can we talk? I'm sorry. Sometimes he showed up at the house to see the kids and lingered in the doorway like he expected me to make him feel like a husband again. But I didn't. I kept it respectful. I kept it clear. You can see Jasmine in the living room, I'd tell him, and you can take her for dinner on Friday if she wants, but you're not coming in here acting like you still live here. He hated that. Not because it was unfair, because it was firm. One evening he stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, eyes tired. You really gonna treat me like I'm nothing? He asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match his drama. I'm treating you like a man who made choices, I said calmly, and now you have to live in them. He swallowed hard, and I saw something flash across his face, anger, then grief, then that helplessness men feel when charm stops working. Denise, I messed up, he said. Yes, I replied, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just so you can feel comfortable. He stared at me like he wanted to argue, then looked away like he couldn't. That was the pattern now. He would come in expecting the old Denise, the one who smoothed things over. And he would meet the new Denise, the one who refused to be smoothed over. The lease situation didn't resolve overnight. That's the part people don't understand when they say, just leave. Leaving emotionally can be one day. Leaving legally can take months. My attorney stayed on the leasing office. We sent written notices. We provided documentation. Calvin paid what he owed under the agreement because he knew he had no room to play games anymore, not with my credit frozen, not with a lawyer involved, not with Marcus watching him with eyes that no longer admired blindly. Eventually, the leasing manager agreed to a formal change. Calvin would requalify a loan, or the lease would be terminated and released without me. Calvin tried to convince Tasha to take over. That was the mess he had made. Two adults stuck in a life built on lies, now scrambling to figure out who would pay for the truth. Tasha called me once, late, voice shaking with panic. I can't afford to move, she whispered, and he's saying you trying to put us out. I closed my eyes, not from guilt, just from exhaustion. I'm not trying to put you out, I said gently. I'm trying to get my name out, talk to Calvin. He's the one who promised you a life he didn't have the right to offer. Tasha's breathing hitched. He said you hate me. I don't, I said. I don't even know you, but I know what it feels like to be used by someone you trusted. She went quiet, and for a moment, Both of us just listened to our own lives on opposite ends of a phone call. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." "Me too," I answered. "For both of us." When we hung up, my hands were shaking, not with anger. With the strange grief of realizing how many women get hurt by the same kind of man, just in different rooms. Healing didn't come like a movie. There was no sudden glow-up, no perfect morning where I woke up and felt brand new. Healing came like laundry, one load at a time. Some nights, Jasmine would sit on my bed and ask questions that had no easy answers. "Do you still love him?" she asked once, voice small. I took a breath. "I love the father of my children," I said carefully, "but love doesn't mean I let someone harm me." "What if he changes?" she whispered. "If he changes," I said, smoothing her hair, "then he changes for himself first, and we'll deal with what's healthy when it's real, not when it's promised." Marcus pushed Calvin to go to counseling. Calvin went a couple times. I didn't attend with him, not because I didn't care. Because I wasn't building my future on his potential anymore. I built it on my own actions. I started walking in the evenings after dinner, just around the block. The air would be warm, and I'd smell people's dinners through open windows. Fried chicken, garlic, somebody's sweet cornbread. Sometimes I'd hear couples laughing, kids arguing, TVs playing in the background. Life, messy, ordinary life. And I'd remind myself, my story is still mine. One Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook, not the one filled with evidence, but a new one. I wrote goals that had nothing to do with Calvin. Pay off my credit card. Save an emergency fund. Take Jasmine on a mother-daughter weekend. Finish my certification at work. Keep peace in my home. The words looked small, but they felt powerful. Because they were mine. Calvin did try to come back once, standing on the porch with apology in his eyes and fear in his voice. "I want my family back," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. "The family is still here," I answered. "But the version of you who was safe for us, you killed that version when you used my name." His eyes filled with tears. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish. I just told the truth. "If you want to be in your children's lives, be consistent," I said. "Be honest, pay what you owe, show up as a father, but don't ask me to pretend you didn't do what you did." He nodded slowly, like the weight of it finally made sense. Then he walked away. And I closed my door, not out of bitterness, but out of boundary. Now, when I think back to that day in my kitchen, the smell of beans, the warm light, my name on a piece of paper that didn't belong to me, I don't just feel pain. I feel a lesson. Never sign your peace away. Never let love make you careless with your name. And if you ever find yourself paying for a door you don't have a key to, don't beg for answers in tears. Get facts. Get boundaries. Get your life back. You know, I used to think the worst part of betrayal was the other woman. But it was. The worst part was realizing how quietly it happened. How a man can come home, eat your food, kiss your forehead, call you baby, and still attach your name to a life you didn't choose. That envelope didn't just show me a bill. It showed me a truth I had been avoiding. Trust without boundaries can turn into debt, real debt, fast. And if you're listening to me right now, I want you to hear this the way I wish somebody had told me years ago. Love doesn't require you to gamble your future. Marriage doesn't mean you ignore your instincts. And loyalty should never cost you your dignity. I didn't handle this perfectly. I had nights where I cried so quietly I scared myself. I had mornings where I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. But I also had moments where I chose myself. One phone call, one document, one boundary at a time. And little by little, my peace came back. Not because Calvin suddenly became a better man. Because I stopped letting his choices write my story. So let me ask you something, from one woman to another. If you found out your name was tied to a secret apartment, would you confront him right away, or would you gather proof first? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know how you would have handled it. And if you want more real, emotional, first-person stories about family betrayal, secrets, justice, and healing, make sure you subscribe and support the channel so these stories can keep reaching the women who need them.